So, Havdalah. I'm so grateful to my Jewish learning for letting me teach about Havdalah. It is one of my favorite services that we have in our tradition. So before we even get to Havdalah, though, we need to back up to Shabbat. And excuse me if you hear some stray hammering. So people are just closing my walls back up. So Rambam says that a person is obligated to remember Shabbat when it comes in and when it leaves. And that's how I feel in my heart as well. But there are a number of people in our tradition who disagree that they feel like it is not a deoraita mitzvah, meaning it is not a Torah-bound mitzvah to do Havdalah the way Rambam does, but in fact that it's derabanan, that it's a stricture put in place by the rabbis that we get from the Talmud. So we see this relationship. Someone posted, Jews disagreeing? I know, it's crazy. So we see this tension throughout our history, both in the observance of Havdalah and its placement in Sidurim as well. Some have it, some do not. But I think that it makes sense to call it a deoraita mitzvah, to understand it as a deoraita mitzvah. And for me, I take this understanding from how we do birkat hamazon, the grace that we have after meals, right? The text says, ve'achalta ve'savata uverachta, right? When you eat and you are satisfied, then you bless, right? We don't actually have a command to say brachot before we eat, right? We're commanded to do it afterwards. And I feel like the same is true with Havdalah. Right, like we are eating of all that the Sabbath is offering us, and it's like, how much more so should we be blessing after Havdalah and after Shabbat, excuse me, on the greatness that we've enjoyed for Shabbat. So that's my take on it. Of course, like I said, the Talmud disagrees with me, but Rambam agrees, so I'm okay with that. So Shabbat and Kiddush. In order to truly understand Havdalah, we have to look at Kiddush and what role that plays in our Friday night liturgy and the creation of Shabbat. And then we see how it's mirrored later on in Havdalah as we unpack Shabbat. So let's take a quick peek at, let's take a quick peek at Genesis chapter 2, which is where we get Kiddush from. Heaven and earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished God's work which God had made. And God rested on the seventh day from all the work which God had made. And God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. Because on that day, God rested from all God's work which God in creating had made. And for Shabbat, the key word for us is la'asot, to make, or had made, as this translates. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So in our Kiddush, we are retiring essentially for the week, right? From the work which we have for ourselves, and practicing imitatio Dei, imitating God. And God rested, so we are going to be resting as well. And so when we go into Shabbat, it's not just share with us Rambam's reference to remember. Oh, yes, I will type in some, I'll type in the citations at the end. So I lost my train of thought. You know what, Julie, I'm going to just focus, and if you can keep an eye on the chat, because I get so distracted from the chat.
Definitely. We can have question time at the end. How about we do that?
Sounds great. Thank you. So I'm going to close the chat for me. Thanks. All right. So we're retiring from our work, and then from everything that we've already made, which allows us to make something new, which is Shabbat, la'asot et Shabbat. And we do this through ritual. So in a way, we are becoming on Friday evening like Kohanim. We're given the ability to proclaim the sanctity of things. And we see this given to the Kohanim as well in, let me just find my here, jump on into Leviticus. So we see right here in verse 10, God is giving to the Kohanim this assignment. And this is, of course, after what happened with Nadav and Avihu. So the Kohanim, the priests, are being told not to come in with strong drink. Why? So that they may know the difference. Lehavdil ben hakodesh uven hachol, so that they are able to tell the difference between what is, we would translate as holy or distinct, sanctified, in some way set apart. That's often how we translate kadosh, vechol, the things that are common, mundane, not to give them less, those things don't necessarily have less stature. They're just different in another way, right? We would never say that the rest of the week is unholy, right? God's presence is coming through the entire week, but Shabbat is distinct from the rest of the days of the week. So in this way, we're becoming like Kohanim, given that the task of calling something holy, and which is Shabbat. And not only do we call it holy, we make it holy through Kiddush, through the rituals that we enact to make Shabbat, through the mitzvot that we do and the mitzvot that we don't do. Okay, so that's Shabbat. All right, we go in, we light our candles, we have our meal, we light our candles, we make Kiddush, we have our meal. Then we have our 25 hours of Shabbat. On the flip side, at the end of Shabbat, we begin with Havdalah. I'm going to share the text a little bit, and I'll stop sharing at some points. And I'm pretty sure Julie already shared with you a version of this. This is, let me move this. Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Let me just make sure. Okay. I know I had some share screen problems at Seder, but I think that's all fixed up. Can you see the screen clearly when I'm sharing?
Yeah, it's a little fuzzy in the inside. Should we use the text that you sent from the Rabbinical Assembly?
Sure, I'll use that. Let me just point out here, because this does not have it. Let's see if I can just make it a little bit bigger for a moment. So this is from the Koren Sachs Siddur, and the reason why I really like this version is because it has all of the citations for you that we'll be going over. And in general, in the Koren Sachs Siddur, it tells you where all of the texts come from. So I love this for that reason. But you'll see, the opening of Havdalah is from Isaiah. You'll see that it's mostly made up of Psalms. And there's 8, this first chunk is just these 8 verses, mostly Psalms. So I'm gonna jump on over to the Rabbinical Assembly. Where are you? Here you are, Rabbinical Assembly. That way, it's much clearer. Okay, so here's the text of Havdalah, and I'll just fast forward down here for the translation. And like I said, it's like three sections, the way we're going to address it today. We've got the first, it's almost like an invocation, which is this part. And that mirrors Vayechulu, which we say on Friday night for Kiddush, before we make Kiddush. So this serves that same purpose, to give us an introduction. And then we've got this part, La Yehudim, which that's when we start to do the ritual, and then the actual act of Havdalah, which is down here with the 4 brachot that we will make over our 3 ritual items, and then the 4th bracha, which is the actual act of Havdalah, of separation. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment as we just go into these verses. So, you know what? I think I'll keep this up, because I'd rather you see this. You don't have to, I look the same. I'll just keep looking at the screen. So this begins, Hine el Yeshuati, Eftach velo efchad. And the translation is down here. Behold, God of my unfailing help. I will trust in God and not be afraid. So we see here already Yeshuati. And one of the themes, I think the major theme of this, this first chunk of Havdalah is Yeshua, is salvation. Now, I know some people might, this might catch their ears, because Yeshua is the name for Jesus according to the Christian tradition. That's Jesus in Hebrew. But the idea of Yeshua, of salvation, is different for Christians and for Jews, right? In the Christian tradition, I believe, salvation through Jesus is about sin and being saved from sin. In the Jewish tradition, we don't want to be saved from sin. We believe that is a part of the responsibility of having free will. And elsewhere in our tradition, it talks about, I think it's Jeremiah. Jeremiah threatens the people with God being able to make us only make the right choice and never ever sin. And that's seen as a bad thing, right? Because the beauty of being in this relationship with the divine is that we have the ability to, quote unquote, to sin, to err, to do wrong. And out of our love and our devotion, we choose to do mitzvot, and we choose to do what is right and being asked of us. It's considered more mishuvach, more praiseworthy. So it's also the root of the word Yeshua. That's what we're talking about. Sorry, lost my train of thought. So that is the theme here, the idea of salvation. So what are we being, what is salvation then in our tradition? If it's not, the salvation from sin, it is the salvation from poverty, from illness, disease, hate, racism, sexism, homophobia, all of those things that are constantly plaguing us. That is what we are asking, we are begging for salvation from. And that is connected directly to where we are immediately coming from, which is the Sabbath, which is Shabbat. And Shabbat is a ta'am olam haba, a taste of the world to come. When we won't have to experience all of the isms. We won't have the poverty. We won't have the illness, some say. Again, there's of course machlokot. There are disagreements in our tradition about what olam haba, the coming world, will be. But I'm in the school of we won't have to deal with that kind of tsuris anymore, those kinds of problems. So we're asking, as we go back into the week where we squarely have to face these earthly problems, that God, please let there be soon salvation, Yeshua, from those ills, the ills of our current society. So that's the first verse. Ki ozi v'zimrat ya v'yehili lishua. So I translate this a little bit differently. Here this is how it's standardly translated. For the Lord is my strength and my song. God is my deliverer. And we might recognize that from the Song of the Sea, right? 'Tis the season as the Israelites are passing through the waters and they get to the other side, they're singing the Song of the Sea, and this is in the Song of the Sea. So again, a connection, a reminder of the original for us, right? Like the original Yeshua, the original Geula, salvation and redemption of our people. And it's, again, God did it then, God can do it again for us. So we're going to recall it for ourselves and for God. But, Ozi v'zimrat yah, God is my strength and my song. So a zemer is also a pruning hook. I feel like I've talked about this. I may have talked about this in another MJL class, but zemer is also a pruning hook. And so Ozi v'zimrat yah, or the zimrat yah, is the hook of God. And when we're pruning things, we're cutting away the things that are no longer necessary, things that are in our way, to clear the path ahead. So this is an amazing theological statement to say, oh, the way that I'm going to get through the week, the way that we're going to eventually get to this Yeshua is two things. Ozi, my own personal strength, what I bring to the situation, my perspective, which we'll get into when we get down to the La Yehudim part, v'zimrat yah, and the gift of God to just come in and move those challenges out of the way for me, to slash and dash them out of my way, like what happened in Egypt, right? Like what happened to the Mitzarim in Mitzrayim, right? God just came along and moved those out of the way. So we hold on to that as we're moving forward. Eftach v'lo efchad. I'm going to trust that this will happen v'lo efchad, and I won't be afraid. This will, for me, make salvation, right? Which, if we've ever been to camp or any Jewish dancing function, we recognize from the Mayim dance, with joy shall you draw water out of the wells of Yeshua, right? Out of salvation again. So this is really the theme that's coming, that's driving us home. And I forgot to say at the beginning that the mood of Havdalah is a somber mode, because these problems are real, because we have experienced, God willing, if we let ourselves, the taste of Olam Haba in whatever way we do for us. I abstain from the news on Shabbat. Like, that's one of my ways that I have a tam Olam Haba, a taste of the world to come. Whatever the things that we have done, now we really have to interact with that reality and that sadness. So we are hoping once again to cultivate the joy that comes through this Yeshua. Again, L'Adonai HaYeshua al Amcha B'Yirchatecha Salah, right? To God is this Yeshua, and God is going to dole it out unto us. Please God, Amen, Selah. Next concept. Adonai Tzevaot Imanu Niskav Lanu Elohei Yaakov Selah. So the Lord alone is our help. May God bless God's people. That was from the last one. The Lord of the universe is with us. Adonai Tzevaot, the God of Jacob, is our protection. Okay. So Adonai Tzevaot is a fascinating name that translates into this as the Lord of the universe, but we'll traditionally hear it as Lord of hosts. And I remember I was like, what are hosts, when I first started learning this? And it's military terminology, like a host, an army, right? So now we're bringing in this new picture of God as like an army general. And what's that about? So we learn in the Middle Ages that when there were a lot more like wars that were staged, that Shabbat came to symbolize a military victory, and vice versa, obviously, right? If you have a military victory, then you can rest. So this, by naming God Adonai Tzevaot in these next few verses, it is an aspiration, a hope that we will arrive at the next Sabbath, right? From this Shabbat to the next Sabbath. Adonai Tzevaot, you're going to take us from here to the next one, right? So already we are walking into the next week assured, feeling assured in ourselves that we will see another Shabbat, that there may be wars during the week, but we will see again another Shabbat. Adonai Tzevaot Imanu, Miskav Lanu Elohei Yaakov Selah. Miskav Lanu, this word relates to, it's another military word relating to being high up, right? And having a visual advantage over the situation. So, we're like just trusting in God, trusting that the higher perspective will guide us through. So my question is always, when I run into names of God, because I love learning about the different names for God that can be used in different situations, and Havdalah is full of them, and I really could take an entire shiur just to talk about the different names for God, but Yaakov I think is really important to focus on. Elohei Yaakov Selah. Besides it being the other side of the verse, what does it come to teach us in this context? Now, I'm gonna stop this screen share. Actually, no, I don't have to. I can just pop over here. Now you see the 10 Sfirot, correct? I assume yes. Thanks. So with our 10 Sfirot, these are the 10 Sfirot of our Kabbalistic tradition. And in the middle is Tiferet. And each of our Sfirot take on also the energy of one of our spiritual patriarchs and one of our spiritual matriarchs. And Tiferet takes on the spiritual energy of Yaakov. And so what does that have to do with Havdalah and this imagery that we're currently exploring? Well, we're going into our week and we're praying for the ability to make it from one end to the other end. We're trusting that the divine, who's got this divine perspective, will be able to oversee what's happening. And that, the arsenal, is that the right word? I guess the main soldier, I suppose, like for lack of a better analogy, the Goliath of God's army is Tiferet, is this element of Yaakov. And we learn in our Kabbalistic tradition that Tiferet is able to don the cloak, to don the cloak of all of the other Sfirot, of all of the other energies that are needed. And so this image of God as Tiferet, God as Yaakov, sends us the message, gives us the consolation that God is able to do whatever needs to get done in any situation to get the job done. I love this text. It's so hugely theological. So when there needs to be more chesed in a situation, Tiferet, also known as Yaakov, can don the cloak of chesed. When there needs to be more netzach, more endurance, right? Especially on Wednesday, it's Wednesday, on Wednesdays. When you need the energy to get through, Tiferet can push through and the cloak of Netzach, right? So Tiferet and the name of Yaakov are able to be whatever they need to be in order to get the job done. I'm gonna scooch back over here. Oops, wrong one, this one. I'm singing it in my head. Adonai Tzevaot, Ashrei Adam Boteach Bach. Again, Adonai Tzevaot, right? Just a reminder of this military image that we will get to Shabbat again. It's okay. Adonai Hoshia, right? So here we go back with the salvation. All right. So far, those are our two major themes. Saving humanity ultimately from all of the service that we deal with, and that we will make it to the next Shabbat, Im Yirtzeh Hashem, Be'ezrat Hashem, with God's help. So, La Yehudim Hayta Ora. So this is where I light my Havdalah candle when I am doing Havdalah, because I sing it really slowly personally, and I don't want it to burn down from the top. So I light it here because now we're actually starting to talk about light. This verse is from the book of Esther. And again, we think back to the major Yeshua, the major salvation that happened in the book of Esther, right? All of the Jews were saved, and it was a celebration. So La Yehudim Hayta Ora, right? There was light and joy, the simcha, the sason, the ikar, and honor, joy, gladness, and honor for the Jewish people, right? And in that way, ken tieh lanu, may it be so for us as well. May we experience that same salvation. So I'm going to switch just to give a kavanah that I think is really important for these few words. And this is from Rabbi David Wolfblank. And it's 3 pages, so I couldn't copy the whole thing for you. And I think I may have said this, I couldn't make a source sheet because there's so many amazing resources, but I'll share them all with you at the end. You should absolutely check them out. But Rabbi David Wolfblank, Alav Hashalom, focuses on the 4 signs of release from hardship. So we have Ora right here. Hold on one second, I'm in the wrong spot. Ora, there's light. V'simcha, joy. Simcha, v'sason, and he calls that inner gladness, right? Because how is simcha different from sason? Simcha is like the external simcha that we see. Sason is the inner joy, vaikar, an inner value, inner self-worth. So I just want to share with you what he says about these words. He says, when coming out of dark and difficult periods in life, right? And in this case, we're going into the Sabbath, or actually also in Pesach, and that's why I was thinking about, I'm so excited to get to do Havdalah, teach on Havdalah during Pesach. When coming out of these dark and difficult periods in life, the first signs of change are experienced as ora, as light, right? And that's what we have as we're going into the week. A glimmer of hope, a light at the far end of a tunnel. Continued movement towards betterment produces simcha and sason, increasing levels of happiness, such as a sense of joy, release, gladness, etc., that accompany the anticipated hope for a better future. These feelings accrue within and change one's self-perception, right? That's the OZ, right? Going back to what we said in the first verse, my own strength. Change one's self-perception, culminating in ikar, a transformed sense of the self with greater self-esteem and increased self-valuation. From being fearful, as we are especially at Havdalah, of going evtach velo evchad, right? I will trust and not be fearful. From being fearful and huddled against the dark storm to openly valuing oneself is a vast change. And so we're already making that shift with just these words. So to recap, he says, Ora is to see the light, right? I light the candle here. Simcha is to appreciate the light. Sason is to feel the youthful excitement of the light, to feel it radiating within our bodies. And ikar is to take the value of the light into the week with us. Okay, so then we get into the ritual of the thing. Now, with Shabbat, we go, let's see, we have Kiddush, then we have, we have candles, Kiddush, and then we have Hamotzi. So we basically have the light, the sanctification, and the meal, essentially, right? We do it in a slightly different order here at Havdalah. So we start with the grape juice, but that's not the Kiddush for us. At the end is going to be our, what we would call our Kiddush, or our Havdalah, technically. So we make it over our grape juice, and of course there's the idea that we fill it to overflowing, because we should be able to live lives that allow us to spill wine freely, right? We shouldn't be so desperate that we can't afford to spill a drop of wine. And in that spilling, more will come. It's already a lesson in that. And then once we extinguish the candle in the cup, I'm going to jump around to make sure that I get to cover a couple of things, that the wine or the grape juice itself is transformed. You might see people sticking their fingers into the cup and then touching it to their ears, touching it to their eyes, touching it to their pockets, right? Because as we're bringing the light into the grape juice and using it to be our symbol of the Yeshua for the week, we put it on our eyes so that we have clear vision. We put it on our ears so that we can understand deeply, to get the wisdom of the week. And we put it on our pockets because we need parnasa, right? Like, we need livelihoods, we need money to survive, and that's a real reality. To the spices. So I learned a lot of fascinating things about these spices, so I'm so excited to be able to share them with you. So I learned that, when was this? I'm going to say it's in the Middle Ages, that traditionally people would end a meal with spices, like that was dessert, to smell a sweet aroma. And so they would basically burn incense in a way. They would put the spices together and put it on fire, and then it would just smell wonderfully. I was like, that's amazing for dieters, like just to have at the end of the meal, it's just like a great reach nichoach, a beautiful smell. And on Havdalah, there is no fire burning. So there was no way to have this sumptuous spice experience. So there is now the spice box, which serves as that, like the symbol of our meal. But our tradition is never so simple to say that there is one meaning for anything. You may be familiar with the idea that the spices come to revive our soul as our neshama yetera, as our additional soul departs us on Shabbat. And that is certainly what is taught. And we learn those midrashim. There's another layer to it, in that the particular spice that is used on Havdalah is myrtle, is the hadas. And there's the midrash that teaches that the hadas, the myrtle, is the plant of which Gan Eden, of which the Garden of Eden is made up of. So our neshama yetera, our additional soul, is coming to us straight from Gan Eden, and then departs to go back to Gan Eden. And so why do we have these spices then? The Midrash teaches us that it's a really painful experience for our neshama yetera, for our additional souls, to leave Gan Eden and to come into our earthly world, right? Can you, and I was, reading, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. If you're in Gan Eden, it's like, hey, do you want to go back to earth for a little bit? And it's like, absolutely not. So the myrtle is like a gift in our tradition to the neshama yetera for coming to be with us. And I love that. I thought that was beautiful. But I thought if it's such a tircha, it's such a burden for our neshama yetera, our additional souls, to leave Gan Eden for 25 hours, how much more so must it be of a burden for our souls, our everyday souls, to have left Gan Eden to be here with us in our bodies. So my new midrash that I'm telling you fine folks, is that the spices are a siman of Gan, or a symbol of Gan Eden, for our everyday souls, not to revive them per se, but to remind them of Gan Eden and that they will go back. And that's our job, is to work to bring about Gan Eden in this world, to give us that strength that we need to do the work in the world that the week is calling us to do, to remind us that there is a higher purpose. So I lovingly share that with you. And then the candles. So there's again a machloket, because we're here with the, I wasn't reading the English for you. I'm sorry. The blessing over the spices, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei v'samim. We bless the spices and smell them. And then Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, borei meorei ha'esh, which is plural. And so, we're blessing. We see that of the wicks, there's multiple wicks, multiple fires that become one fire, which explains why we've got a plural blessing, borei meorei ha'esh, the many sources of this esh, this one fire. And there are a lot of reasons why there are a lot of things that this fire could stand for. So my God, it could stand for the lights of the 10 sefirot. It could stand for the lights of the fire themselves, the colors that make up the fire. I like to think of how this is the sparks of all of our nishamot, all of our souls that become the one flame of the divine, right? That's uniting all of us. And then the act of the actual Havdalah. I'm looking at the time. We are not going to get to Eliyahu Hanavi, unfortunately. But so in our final Havdalah, we have a bunch of distinctions, things that Hashem created that were separated from one another. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamavdil bein kodesh lachol. And we'll see when we're looking at these that they they start out universal and they get more and more particularistic. Bein kodesh lachol, separating between that which is distinct and that which is everyday. Bein or lachoshech, bein light and dark. Traditionally, people say Bein Yisrael la'amim, and of course, in our tradition, there have been oscillations between keeping this in the Siddur, taking it out of the Siddur because it's nationalistic. Some people say it, some people take it out. I think you have to say something because the song doesn't work otherwise. I say Bein Adam Livriot. I say who created the distinction between the human and all of the rest of the creations, right? Because, that's really the difference when we're looking at the first creation stories. We're all as humans charged with partnering with God. And then the Jewish aspect for me is in the next part. Bein Yom HaShvi'i v'Sheshet Yamei Hamaseh, right? Who separated between the seventh day of the week, the Shabbat, which is uniquely Jewish, the Sheshet Yamei Hamaseh, the 6 days of the week. And there's 4 distinctions here. Again, another reason why we can't just take something out that we don't like. There's 4 distinctions on the spectrum. That's 8. 8 we know in our tradition is like it's 1 after 7, right? So after Shabbat, it's like the 8th day, and we're being escorted into what's next. And then we make the final blessing, Baruch atah Hashem hamavdil bein kodesh lachol, who separates between that which is distinct and that which is every day. And you'll see in the order of the blessings, we've done. We've started with the meal, the sustenance, because the spices symbolize the meal, where we would have the challah. Now we have the spices. We have the candle, which symbolizes the fire. Right at the beginning of Shabbat, we start with the fire to create just like in Mitzrayim, not on our way out of Mitzrayim, God was there as fire, holding in the back and in the front. It's the same way with Shabbat. There is fire on the front end to keep all of the disturbances out of Shabbat, and we have to extinguish the fire on the other end, on the Havdalah side, to allow the week to come back in. And this is our separation, Hamavdil bein Kodesh l'chol, as we separate between Shabbat and the rest of the week. I think, let me just stop sharing to make sure I covered everything. I did. I'm trying to think if there's anything that's pressing for Elijah the prophet. Nah, we'll have to do another session on Eliyahu Hanavi. It's fantastic.
Well, there are a few questions that came in through the chat box. The first was, are there any differences between the Havdalah text of the Svardi tradition and the Ashkenazi tradition?
Oh, that's a good question. You know what? I don't know. I do not know. I'm most familiar with the Ashkenazi Nusach. Yeah.
Okay. And can you reuse a Havdalah candle?
Yes. Thank God. Yes, because it gets extinguished. It's really the only, I think it's the only candle in our tradition that we do reuse, because every other candle it's Yom Tov in some way, and we can't extinguish it anyways. But for Havdalah, the act for us is in the extinguishing. So each and every week we get to use the same Havdalah candle.
And someone asked if you could demonstrate how to, like, when you're holding up the light, how you hold your hands.
Sure. Yeah. So some people have fingernails. I unfortunately bite mine. But if you've got really nice fingernails, someone is holding up the light, and there's so many fantastic midrashim. Some say that the fingertips, these fingernails, are like the tips of our souls, or that the angels have skin, exteriors that are like our fingernails. So when we're holding our fingers like this, we see they all look, there's a couple of things. They look different. They're different sizes and different shapes, right? But when we hold our fingers like this, they look equal, right? Like they're all the same all of a sudden. So that's another look towards Zman Mashiach, towards the Messianic era, when all of the differences will be equalized. Because these are our soul tips, or our angelic remnants, when we can see like this, we hold it like this, and we see the fire reflected in them, it's like a vision of the organus, the hidden light. And in the beginning, when Adam Harishon, when the first human being was afraid, and God created light for him, for Adam Harishon, taken from the original light of creation. That light was hidden away because we weren't ready for it yet. And it was hidden, like a little spark of it was put into that Havdalah candle for Adam Harishon. So we can see that original light which shone from the beginning of creation to the end of creation. And so we get a taste of that during Havdalah, right? It's again a reminder of the Yeshua that is coming.
Okay, and there was one more question, and after that last question, I was wondering if you would be willing to sing the Havdalah, the full thing for us, and kind of take us through it as a demonstration. So the last question was, can you explain Havdalah when Shabbat ends and goes into Passover, or when a holiday ends, when it's not a Shabbat Havdalah but a holiday Havdalah?
Yeah. So when Shabbat goes into Passover or any holiday, right? We're not saying Bein Kodesh L'chol, because it's not Bein. It's between Kodesh and Kodesh. So the transition is Bein. It's Bein Kodesh L'Kodesh, and it's only with I think it's only with the fire. Let me just double check. Pretty sure it's only with the fire because it's already sanctified. It's funny, I wasn't paying attention when we did it the other day. I just said I'm in because I wasn't leading. And then when we come out, it's only with the Beis Samim. I should really double check this. I forgot to double check because we're going to be doing this on when it's coming up. I'm going to have to double check because it's one thing, and I can't remember which one it is that we cut out. But I can check if you have like 5 minutes to stay around after. I'll look in my book.
Great. And would you take us through the Havdalah now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
And someone asked in particular, they said they were familiar with the Debbie Friedman tunes, but were curious to hear other tunes and also a tune that would take us through the entire Havdalah.
Sure. So I switch into the Debbie Friedman tune, usually because when I'm leading Havdalah, I'm leading it for like people who only really know the Debbie Friedman one. But the one that I use for the opening part, I learned from B'nai Jeshurun in New York City. And then I switch into another traditional tune that I think people know. So I'll go with those three different tunes. Hine el Yeshuati eftach v'lo efchad ki ozi v'zimrat ya Adonai v'yehi li Yeshua Ushavtem mayim besason mimayne ha-Yeshua Ladonai ha-Yeshua alamecha birchatecha sela Adonai tzevaot imanu Miskav lanu Elohei Yaakov Selah Adonai tzevaot ashrei adam boteach bach Adonai Hoshia HaMelech Yanenu v'yom koreinu LaYehudim Hayta ora V'simcha v'sason v'kar Ken tihelanu Ken tihelanu Kos Yeshuot Esa Uv'Shem Adonai Ekra Ya da 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 ya 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 da 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 ya da 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 ya 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 da ya da 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen ay ay na 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 ay 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 na 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 ay ya na 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 ay 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 ya da 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei v'samim besamim. Ay, 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 na, 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 ay, 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 na, 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 ay. Na 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 ya 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 na 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh borei meorei ha'esh ay ay na 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 ay 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 na 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 ay na 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 ya 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 na 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben adam levriot ben yom hashvi'i l'sheshet yemei hamaseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ay ay na 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 ay 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 na 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 ay na 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 ay 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 na 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 na. And my favorite part about this is the story, the midrash, the tradition, that the greater the sizzle, the better the week. So I love like really going for a real sizzle. I don't know where my speakers are on this computer, so try to. Oh man. If this were really Saturday night, this would be an amazing week. Maybe it's going like this because it's Pesach. Or maybe it's because there's coffee in my Kiddush cup. I don't know. One of those two. Shavua Tov.
That was great. People also were commenting that you have a beautiful voice. So thank you so much for doing that. And while you were doing that recitation, I did look up the answer to our question. So
great.
Correct, it is the samim, the spices that we don't do, and going from Shabbat into a holiday like we did for Passover. And when we're going from a holiday into the regular week, we don't do the spices, and we also don't do the candle. So it's just the wine. And someone asked for the spelling of the change in the last paragraph. I think you mean Bein Kodesh LaKodesh. I'll put that in. And thank you so much for this wonderful class. Thank you everyone for being here. We are going to be back next week with another class, actually on Tuesday at the same time, Tuesday at 12 p.m. And we'll be looking at the Moda Ani, or the Modeh Ani, depending on what gender you choose to say that blessing in. It's essentially the blessing of gratitude. So we hope to see you next week with Rabbi Shefa Gold